away we go.
Episode 9. Episode 9, part 4. Trump and the pardons. Specifically, they started with the Jan 6ers, which is funny because a lot of them that got pardoned shortly thereafter, they actually then were caught for violent acts and other things that we don't even want to mention, just really heinous stuff. So it's like, yes, these were criminals. And then more recently, there are people pardoned for more financial crimes, which is a whole other discussion, but that definitely is crime. And then you had some others you wanted to mention.
There was some
there were some podcasters that, at least in the right-wing sphere, that were popular.
And then there was, that podcast, or he's that fighter. What's that guy's name? Who was from Romania? Who was Andrew Tate.
Oh, yeah.
So he went to bat for him to bring him back to America, so he doesn't get prosecuted in Romania for rape, and sex trafficking. So So do you want to
Well, and then what I find funny is that the best that most of these right-wing people can come up with when this topic comes up is they're like, well, Biden pardoned so-and-so, and what I find happening is they can't even mention who Biden pardoned. They're just like, well, but didn't Biden pardon a bunch of people? Who? Tell me.
Right, when you start to look at who Biden pardoned, including his son, there was justification. There was absolute justification because some of these, were sketchy arrests and things like that. And with his son, look, there was a whole documentary made, and I know people will say MSNBC. No, it was truthful. It was accurate. It was from the people who actually were involved with it, who were under Trump getting this stuff done. It was all a fraud. It was all made up bullshit. Watch it. I forget the name of it. It was Rachel Maddow did it. It basically explains how the whole Hunter Biden thing was a scam. None of it was real. It was all made up bullshit. It was extortion.
I trust Maddow. She's
right, and it was very well done. And it was interviewed by the people who orchestrated it and the ones who did it. And they actually went and apologized at the end of the documentary to Hunter Biden, saying, "We're sorry, we were duped by Trump, and this is bullshit, and we never should have done this." So and the reason he pardoned his son for that reason was that Trump was going to come and put him in jail, probably indefinitely, or even worse. Who knows? So he had to do that. Now, I'm sure if it would have been anyone else, he maybe would have let it go through the judicial system and said his son would have got off, right? But under Trump, his son never would have had a fair trial, and he did what he did for that reason.
Oh, I was just going to say, part of the deal, though, with Hunter is that he did have a real trial. He did serve some time. He did basically,
for certain,
for some of what he did, and most of what they were trying to, pardon the pun, trump up. Was all surrounding the fact that his father was Biden, and they never would have even done it otherwise. The majority of what came after was, well, you already kind of summed it up.
They were gunning for him, and they would have found something, and it would have had zero evidence.
But the stuff that was legit, and there were legit things that he was guilty of, he mostly served time for.
Right, he already paid his dues,
right?
Whatever it was, and even those are sketchy crimes. So compared to what Trump's kids are doing, billions of dollars in criminal bullshit. So, not even close. The hypocrisy once again. And that's what I was going to get into.
Right.
So he's the law and order president. He's going to make America safe again. He's going to get rid of the criminals and these alleged criminals that he's invented in his own head. Anybody who's brown, anybody who's not a white male with money, who's a psychopath like him, he's going to get rid of, because they're no good. But here he is, pardoning his, hit squad, because he wants his goons there for him when shit hits the fan, which it will. And, and like you said, some of these guys, they fucked up within a month or two, but these are violent criminals with a violent criminal past. So how can you say that you're for law and order and you're going against criminals when you pardon people who, look, you're arresting people without due process, calling them a criminal, and not even giving them a case in court. These guys had their case in court. They were convicted, put in jail. Now, the January 6th was was one of their offenses, but many of these had prior violent offenses. So these are repeat offenders. And statistics will prove across the board that repeat violent offenders generally will be violent again. So you're putting these violent people out into the streets.
Well, what you're really telling them when you're Trump is You can do whatever you want,
That as well.
as long as I approve of it, because I'll defend you.
Right. And I might even go, not beyond going to bat for you, I might even ask you to do stuff for me.
Yeah.
Which he did on January 6th. And they obeyed. So, and he'll do it again, and they'll obey again. Because they know if he wins, look, Musk said it, Trump said it, these guys know it. If they ever lose again, they're all going to jail. For good reason, not for made up bullshit. Because like I said, the hypocrisy is so insane to talk about criminals, invading the country when they are the criminals in the country. And some of them invaded, like Musk. He's not from here.
And there's questionable.
Right.
I mean, at this point, nobody's going to take him up in court, but it's questionable whether he's fully here legally.
Right.
Some of how his visa expired or didn't or whatnot.
And
Yeah.
all these guys who come and destroy this freaking place with their bullshit. These are. So yeah, that was gonna my thing about about what's going on with the hypocrisy of these pardons. And you were mentioning something about, and maybe you know more about this than I do, about some of the white collar crimes that were being.
I just barely started hearing about it, but I guess a number of the ones that he recently pardoned were high profile white collar crime, which people think, oh, white collar, nobody got hurt. Well, when you're stealing millions from somebody's retirement accounts or millions from people's whatever,
Right.
people do die or get hurt or starve or whatever by not having that money that belonged to them.
The pain and suffering that's inflicted, right? When you do these crimes at that scale, what it does to families, individuals, communities, all kinds of things, right? Is immeasurable compared to somebody who just goes into the liquor store and holds it up, who gets a minimum of 10 years, in some cases if it's armed robbery.
Probably $100 if they're lucky.
Right, and who knows what the circumstances were that made this person do that, that decision came about. Anybody under those circumstances might have done that. Who knows, So, but then you got these white collar guys, and they can just, because it's part of, look, this is, because it doesn't interrupt in any real way the course of the capitalist system in this world we've created. It doesn't go punished, in the same balance. There's, this whole idea there's some kind of justice, going on, in this, not, in this country, in the judicial system is so arbitrary in so many different ways, and this just being a prime example. And I think people recognize that how unjust, So I mean, and this is like a human condition where we can have some kind of control over that. I mean, obviously you can extrapolate that into the universe and say, well, yeah, of course that's unjust. Why did this happen to this person and not to that person and all these other things? And anytime you try to make sense of any of that, you're just totally twisting your brain into a fucking pretzel. That there's any kind of justice and there's any kind of reasoning behind a chaotic universe that just kind of goes about its business and is completely indifferent to you. Indifferent to your suffering, indifferent to your happiness.
But if we're looking at, for example, trends in society or in government or whatever,
this is something we have control of.
Yes.
This is what my point trying to be is this. Now in our human existence, we could try to, and what is justice at the end of the day? I know this is kind of like, but it's really part of the conversation, like about, what is justice, and. You can kind of manufacture an idea of like degrees of severity of suffering and and what is the proper course of action after an injustice has occurred, whether or not you're going to punish this person and put them away, or if you're going to try to and in the process rehabilitate. Now, obviously, certain individuals, their mental capacity, they're not going to be rehabilitated. But certainly the idea that justice is somehow causing harm or inflicting harm or executing people who've done something wrong is the answer, then that's just revenge. That's not justice. That's just you turning into what you hated to begin with. So, when you're talking about, and this goes really deep. It goes into free will and it goes into, agency and why people do things that they do. And if you're not ultimately responsible for anything you do, if you kind of believe in some of this, deterministic attitudes that a lot of neuroscientists are kind of buying into. A lot of them are escaping from that idea, in some regard. But, if there's any agency, it's so limited. That's so limited that most people don't. They don't engage in it. They don't. So so what do you do in a situation then when you want justice and not revenge? And obviously, for individuals that can be rehabilitated, that's the answer. Like you kind of like try to figure out what caused this to happen, why their brain was operating that way, and try to figure out like, okay, what can we do to make them connect better with other humans and become a more compassionate, empathetic person. And in this environment, it's very difficult because of the nature of our competitiveness and how we've kind of established our things. So it's not like it's almost in a way to me. It's almost like I find it. I think people are holding tremendous amounts of restraint because I don't know why there's more violence and crime in a lot of regard because of the injustice that's happening to people. They're kind of taking it on the chin a lot of times.
Like I've mentioned more than once that
Right.
I'm surprised we haven't had a second Luigi's. I mean,
Right. I'm very surprised.
Not necessarily healthcare. It could be who knows
I
what.
mean,
but
the school shooting is a prime example.
Yeah.
Why does this happen? Well, look at society, and then they want to blame. Oh, it's mental health. Well, why are they mentally healthy?
But once again,
because
if it's
society's
mental health,
unhealthy.
then why are you cutting money to deal with mental health?
And what they
I mean,
call mental health is actually mental injury. You've injured their brains.
Right.
You've ostracized these kids. You've made them into pariahs. And they recognize this, and then they see TV and everything on TV as if someone does something wrong to you, and you revenge. And that's what they did. So you're surprised, and then you call them the sick one when the society created that. So yeah, you get my point.
Yes.
So I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. Very surprised. I'm sure millions of people fantasize about it and just don't do it. I just never been like that. But I can understand. Like I can not empathize, but I can envision that world, and then my brain rejects it. But I could see it, man. I could fucking see it. So back to this justice thing. So it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Anybody who's watching this and then just saying that somehow believes that Trump is a law and order president who's going to get rid of when he is a criminal, and Musk is a criminal, and all these guys are criminals, and they're all full of shit.